I love Zuko more than I fear you.
The fact that they dropped the best one-liner in Avatar history only to have them break up in a comic will never not be funny to me. Now, take that comment with a grain of salt, as I've never adored May and Zuko just suddenly being together, as it felt like it was just there to make Zutara fans suffer more. But even for someone who finds them just good enough with none of the usual trash romantic writing Avatar is kinda known for, breaking them up in a comic was just dirty. However, this moment does reinforce one of the dark, horrible, absolutely hidden and not at all fact we just collectively chose to ignore, that May is kinda just a plot device for Zuko's story. And that's not a terrible thing. Characters be fictional, and they all have their uses because the plot needs them to. But I think this is the fact that has always kept me at just arm's length from loving a couple that I think I would otherwise adore. It's not that it was poorly foreshadowed and the hookup happened off screen, or that she's just there so he can pretend stabbing his uncle in the back was worth it, which no, yeah, those are all factors too. But it is a testament to how, in spite of the fact that May is just here for Zuko's benefit, she honestly gets way more out of it than he does. Which is what creates this interesting situationship where it's very obvious why the plot needed and low-key forced this thing to happen, but it's compelling enough to make people still fall in love with it. So let's break down this relationship, how it started, why it works, and how it's able to pull off using May to further Zuko's story, and why it works here versus another example. I'm Sarcastic Chorus, I talk ships, so let's dive into Mako. May and Zuko don't have an actual beginning. They pretty much just start season 3 together, and you're just meant to accept this based on moonlit goth vibes. Some would argue that it was semi-foreshadowed by the fact that we have a grand total of, and let me check my notes to be sure I get this right, we have 2 whole moments hint at there being feelings before they suddenly end up together. Now yes, the math is still mathing. That 2 is a bigger number than 0, but I think that isn't much of a win when Zuko's feelings being foreshadowed is still at nada. Yeah, the 2 moments that the show used to pretend that they called this shot was A flashback in Zuko alone, where as kids, May blushed at Mommy's boy walking by. Then B, where May smirks at the possibility of seeing Zuko again.
It'll be interesting seeing Zuko again, won't it, May?
This is what we in the shipping business would call enough, but when it comes to the actual writing of the show, this does feel like a criminal lack of buildup for what is going to be the crux of Zuko's entire status quo in the first half of season 3. Every moment of foreshadowing is pretty much just telling us that May has a thing for her best friend's brother. But we never really get any hints that the half-cooked prince ever had romantic feelings for May. The flashback is more about showing Zuko's relationship with his mom, with facts like Azula has always been terrible just being a bonus, as the tiny tyrant embarrasses Zuko and May by tricking them into playing a game, where Azula lights an apple on fire that was also on May's head, causing Zuko to panic and knock May into the fountain as he was trying to save her, with Azula and the friend who was just happy this bullying wasn't happening to her laughing about it. One could say this is an early example of Zuko having feelings for May, but the actual takeaway this scene leaves you with is that Zuko isn't a sociopath. Zuko here is a child. He saw fire that could catch a girl's hair, panicked, and knocked her into the fountain, with him getting annoyed at his sister's antics and just trudging off after being made the butt of the joke. What this scene conveys isn't dormant romantic feelings. It's that Zuko is an awkward but well-meaning kid who isn't an asshole, the opposite of his antagonistic and self-destructive self in the present. If you want to give this scene some romantic undertones on Zuko's end, you could have him blush at being in this embarrassing situation, have him help her up. Just a look would have done the job to tell us like, oh, there's something here, and they go way back. But they don't. So instead, I'm breaking my neck on the whiplash of them suddenly sucking face in season 3. The story sets up May having feelings, but never sets up Zuko having any back, which is what makes this couple existing feel out of nowhere. These two straight up never interact in the second season. They don't flirt, they don't talk, they are never even in the same room together. Adding adding to this weirdness is that Zuko, from where we left him in season 2, doesn't feel like he would be inclined to throw himself into his sister's best friend. Dude went on a whole emotional journey, sweated out being a hater, turned his life around before flipping a Yui to keep chasing daddy's love, stabbing the real daddy in the back, ruining the lives of millions of people by helping his sister conquer Ba Sing Se. Yet even on their night of his ultimate triumph, where that victory high should be hitting, Zuko still questions whether this was worth it or not, and is unsure if his childbearing father would even give him his honor back. Zuko here is finally in his self-reflection era, but still hasn't left his being shitty one either, so he will and is dwelling on what he did. So him rocking up to season 3 dating May feels like it's out of complete left field, as he's rejected every other woman who's tried this. Everything we know about Zuko tells us that he's not the type to throw himself into a relationship to avoid his problems, making this sudden hookup feel out of character to a certain extent, as it feels out of place and it's built on nothing. The show straight up fails to set that these two could be a thing, just like it fails Zuko being interested in the slightest. So naturally, they try to explain it with comics. And somehow they managed to fumble even this.
I'm not surprised.
So as if to try and work through all the complaints people had with how this relationship was set up, the comic begins with Zuko being a mess as you'd expect, still hanging around the uncle he betrayed, leading him to not be down to go back to the Fire Nation, instead declaring he's gonna stay here in Ba Sing Se. This is fine. It feels very on brand for him. But do you know what's not on brand? Almost everything Azula is doing here. As ever the overachiever, she decides to one-up the as you know exposition dump by making it a as we know exposition dump, revealing information that tracks if you're just thinking from the endpoint back of May and Zuko start dating. Azula reveals that yes, of course they had crushes on each other when they were kids. Boom, plot hole fixed. Which, okay, I can accept that, but then we move into what I think is the actual dumb part of this entire story, as Azula is the one who sets them up. She wants Zuko to come back home with her, so Azula, famous master manipulator and cunning strategist, decides that the best way to get Zuko to come back with her is to hook up May and Zuko, so that if May goes, Zuko will be dragged along by proxy. Which that, plus the fact that Azula and Ty Lee are literally hiding in the bushes as the date happens, feels like a level of kitty logic that is beneath Azula. This 14-year-old is introduced threatening to drown a grown man for fearing nature more than her, and it's made even dumber when the plan straight up fails. As you and May and Zuko start dating after their night out, Prince I Don't Wanna still refuses to go, leaving his girl hanging in what will become a pattern, with Azula having to default to what should have been her plans A through Y, bringing Iroh along with her and making one veiled threat that the old man won't survive the journey home. And after hearing that, of course Zuko agrees to come back. The premise for this comic isn't bad, but Azula's plan is so obviously manufactured to make this plot happen, to give May and Zuko an excuse to be in the same room together. The contrivance of this entire scheme is just blinding to me, especially when the Iroh thing feels like it would have been enough to blackmail Zuko without jumping through this extra hoop, to make May the carrot for Azula's uncle shtick. That said, when the date actually starts, it's at least pretty cute enough, even if it is contrived. May and Zuko catch on to Azula being just there, so they go into the city to hang out and blow off steam. Zuko runs into that girl he almost dated, with this leading to shenanigans, as Zuko's lie about May being a circus performer leads to her using the other woman to knock Zuko into a fountain, but in a small but cute bit of payback for what happened when they were kids. Zuko is mad, but they laugh it off, old feelings flare up, and then they kiss. It's not anything special, but for what little it has to work with, I think it works really well, especially when suffering from mid-quel syndrome, where because it exists between two different canonical stories, it only feels like it's allowed to play with the scraps the others have left it, and can't really change or add anything of its own. It's fine. How they justify it is dumb, though this story in its own way is Meiko in a nutshell. May is being used to get Zuko to do something. But even though she's the least important player in this situation, she is still the one that shines the most, even though by the end of things the story is still making her the afterthought. This is what happens to her all the time, and that is one of the big distractions for these two as a couple. As if you take out the in-universe explanation of why these two are dating, which is easy given we don't really get one, then my attention is being drawn to the writers and why they felt like they needed to slap these two together. With the reason being that Mai is a vital plot device for Zuko's arc in season 3. As if he wasn't dating Mai, Zuko wouldn't have anyone to talk to.
I wonder how I've changed.
I just asked if you were cold. I didn't ask for your whole life story.
Like, this sounds weird, but follow my logic here. If you take out Mai, Zuko, he doesn't have anyone to hang out with when he's home in the Fire Nation. He doesn't have anyone he can emotionally confide in or vent to about his problems or his worries. He just got back in his dad's good graces, so he's not gonna talk to him about how much he hates himself, as his dad only recently just stopped hating him. Zuko's relationship with Azula is 40 flavors of fucked up, though thankfully not the Graves kind. These two can't have an honest convo without Zuko assuming there's some ulterior motive or scheme here. Like, Azula warned Zuko about visiting Iroh secretly and how it would be a bad look if he got caught, but Zuko, even though he knows she's right, automatically assumes the worst, even if this might be the most concerned she has ever and will be for him. Zuko just can't drop his guard around his family. He can't casually be hanging out with these two. There's always going to be a certain level of tension that you can never just do away with. So he needs other people to be with, and as far as we can tell, he doesn't have any acquaintances, let alone friends, when he comes back. So we have nothing for Zuko to use to at least pretend to be happy with his decisions. Mai therefore fulfills a necessary role of giving Zuko something to do. I know what I said. Zuko dating Mai gives us something to cut back to whenever it's his turn to be the B-plot. Mai helps Zuko build the facade of being happy when we all know he's miserable.
You're a crazy old man!
6 hours later.
I don't hate you.
I don't hate you too.
This is the balancing act that Zuko finds himself in at the start of season 3, teetering between having everything he ever thought he wanted and the nagging guilt and uncertainty about what he's done. Zuko can be enjoying a sunset picnic after hiring an assassin to kill the Avatar he knows is probably alive. Zuko's worried that his dad is shutting him out of war meetings and still doesn't respect him. Mai can be the one he's complaining to and trying to help put his mind at ease. Dating Mai allows Zuko to approach a level of normalcy that previously he could only dream of. This contrast between the idyllic life and Zuko's inner turmoil feels like the thing that the story is going for, with Mai being a means to an end to achieve that. Zuko has everything he thought he wanted, only for him to realize what he needs. But for him to have that journey and to really make it compelling and understandable, the story also has to make the point that it doesn't completely suck to be the Fire Lord's son. If Zuko showed up and was just immediately back to being the unloved donkey of Ozai's eye, then it'd be a little hard to justify 10 episodes of Zuko just putting up with it. And worse, it would cheapen the idea of turning against the Fire Nation. If Zuko's life at the Fire Nation was just comically bad, or we watched him be punished for every misstep, it makes Zuko turning against them just a foregone conclusion, solidifying an idea of the Fire Nation being just irredeemably evil, making the act of turning against it the next and only logical step. But in making it pretty cushy, showing how Zuko is given free reign to do whatever he wants, to hang out with Mai, to enjoy luxury vacations, not to mention bullying the other rich kids, it creates the idea that this is what Zuko could gain if he shuts up and doesn't rock the boat. Zuko can get the high life, the girl, hell, maybe even the throne. But to do so, he has to ignore his conscience and be complicit in atrocities that he has witnessed firsthand. This conflict, though, only works if Zuko's home life in season 3 isn't terrible, with all the conflict and anger he feels being created internally. Zuko dating Mai sells the idea that he could be happy here, just like how Mai allows Zuko to externalize all of his issues that he's going through at any given time. This is the dual role that Mai serves, and she does it really well. And I give this a pass versus other examples, as her character is actually enriched by the relationship, by virtue of her getting actual screen time.
Kill me.
Season 2 Mai is fun, but she's kinda just there and complaining. You can sum up every interaction she has as her being the emo one, with us never really getting too much besides that. Finally, we get a little bit more complexity of her not wanting to join Azula only to be threatened and bullied into coming along. Mai, in contrast, is just relieved that her favorite psychopath is back and she's willing to do anything to escape the tedium that is Omashu. Mai did choose to keep Boomy versus getting her little brother back, but it's not really like a long, hard choice, and she doesn't doesn't even react to the news that he was returned safely. Mei is kind of one note in her presentation. So, by virtue of her being given so little to distinguish herself as a character, her dating Zuko actually opens up a massive trove of possibilities for her character within the context of, okay, this is how we're doing things. As it is interesting to watch the most deadpan person on the show be in love and having to deal with Zuko's angst.
Aren't you cold?
I've got a lot on my mind.
This is basically someone dating a celebrity where just by proxy, you also start to get more attention. Mei went from Azula's lackey to Zuko's girlfriend, with this switch up giving her more room to show off just who she is as a person, from how she rolls with Zuko worrying himself into an early grave versus her own deadpan but very nonchalant view of things. Something that makes a lot more sense in the beach episode where we learn about her past, about how her mother was controlling and how she was treated as pretty much just a prop for her family. She was just there to fill space and not cause trouble, leading her to bottle up all of her emotions till apathy became her go-to response for everything that wasn't fighting for her life. This goes a long way to explain why, for her seemingly bummer behavior, she doesn't sweat what's going on. Mei isn't worrying about the future or what might be like Zuko is. Instead, she's cool to just do her own things and be in the present. This situation of her and Zuko also sets Mei up in this fun position where she's now trapped between Zuko and her friend, Azula, with us getting to see how Azula bullies Mei into leaving Zuko so the royal brats can have a chat. Mei does so, but still manages to send daggers at Azula as she walks away, giving us hints at how while Mei seems on most things, she's not the lapdog who is faking it like Ty Lee. Mei loves Zuko, and Azula getting in the way is not something that she just accepts. We see that she has a desire for her own space, and this also highlights Azula's controlling nature. These small seeds of rebellion are building to something later, and these small little things, while not huge, are great ways to explore Mei's character and making her, for a lack of a better word, fun. She has a blasé response to everything, but mixing that with some of the best romantic lines in the series, it all just makes her a character that I have never gotten tired of. Her and Zuko do have fun banter in their earlier appearances, embodying that high school loner couple of two people who are being alone together, pretending how they hate everything when really they are just head over heels for each other. It is a bit random, it's that same overly sappy approach to romance that Avatar is famous for, but in the context of this being the happy life Zuko always envisioned for himself when he got back, to me, this makes this
Orange is such an awful color.
You're so beautiful when you hate the world.
fit way better than most of the other kind of cringy writing that we see in the rest of the show. Plus, all this sappiness hides just what a terrible match they actually are.
Yeah? Ah! Damn it! Ah! There's glass in my eye! Oh!
Now, I wouldn't say these two are destined for divorce like some other couples, but they also have radically different emotional wants and needs, with the way they're willing to receive affection also being incredibly different. Pretty much everything from the boat ride till they hit this beach is Mako in their honeymoon phase. They just got together. Everything is amazing. Any problems just don't exist 'cause love. Then the emotional high wears off and they realize they don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Stop talking to my girlfriend.
Like, Zuko is basically juggling daddy issues, a self-hatred complex that could give Catholics a run for their money, and none of the emotional intelligence to understand any of it. So naturally, the first hiccup he experiences sends him on a complete derailment, as his dad sends him away so he could have the house to himself to talk shop with his war buddies, making Zuko, who now feels sidelined, to have a complete tantrum at the fact. And he is lashing out at every minor inconvenience. So, being on a trip with his sister, her friend, and his girl, thinking his daddy doesn't love him again, he ends up trying to use Mei to fill the void in his life, with his attempts at being the doting boyfriend only revealing that bro doesn't know who he's dating.
Why would I want that?
I saw it and I thought it was pretty. Don't girls like stuff like this?
Maybe stupid girls.
Zuko is a raging hothead. Mei is apathetic and blunt. This makes Zuko's floundering attempts at creating a mood to fizzle out in front of him, with Mei not sugarcoating or appreciating the fact that he's trying, but he is just completely missing the mark, leaving Zuko to get even huffier than he already was. These two are good, when they have the mood, when they're staring at a sunset or having smaller moments like Mei covering her boo's eyes when the old ladies are getting naked. But this is kind of the point in their relationship where they can't really skate by on good vibes or little things. Zuko, after spending his entire life feeling like he has to earn the love of those around him, is trying to do the same with Mei. He isn't into excessive displays of love, preferring to chill and open up in private versus on a crowded beach. That is sunny. Zuko is using Mei as a coping mechanism, and when she isn't responding how he wants her to, he flips back to being a rageaholic, with Mei continuing her lifelong habit of minding her own business, only adding fuel to that already out-of-control fire. As Zuko, bless his heart, we understand why he's like this, but he is looking for things to be mad about. He is looking for that thing to blow up, as that is just more natural to him than asking Mei a straight question. With the questions that he does ask being more about him trying to validate his own opinion, as he is being insecure about Mei being into some rando.
Well, what do you think of him?
I don't have any opinion about him. I hardly know him.
You like him, don't you?
Zuko really invented a whole love triangle out of thin air. Like, it's actually funny when you look back on it when this guy wasn't specifically flirting with Mei for most of the time. But Zuko assumes that he is, so he becomes more hostile to this guy than to some of the villages he burnt to the ground. With all it taking for him to completely lose his shit is Zuko catching the guy trying to talk to his girl. And he goes straight for a fight, as his need for validation just hit controlling. Mei calls out Zuko for this behavior, to which Zuko responds by roasting her entire being.
You have no passion for anything! You're just a big blah!
So naturally she breaks up with him, which honestly, yeah, you get it. Zuko, at this point in his life, is a hazard. Mei has been the crutch that Zuko has been using to survive being back home, and now when she has to putting in the work, she decides she'd rather not, as this is too much. Things have stopped being fun, and she is not prepared to deal with any of this. Her response to problems is to cut them off and move on, which is the opposite reaction that Zuko has been looking for. They do patch things up on the beach, neither can deny that they still care about each other, but they're still pissed with neither of them quickly getting over what just happened. Mei, in one of her finest moments, yells at Azula for reading her like a book, only to then shut out Zuko, who took her finding a second tone as a positive sign for him. She points out that Zuko is still a mess, and her learning to be less bottled up doesn't mean that they're good now or she's doing it because he likes it. With the true thing that saves them being Zuko copping to the fact that the person he's the most angry at,
I'm angry at myself!
Then after seeing that, Mei decides to cut Zuko a break, telling him that she does care for him, keeping these two on track after they nearly push each other off of it. This is good and shows a level of communication that is great to see in young couples. But the funny thing about all this is that while a great moment, now we see the two of them making more of an effort to deal with their personal issues and are actively trying to support one another, and by that I mean we see Mei trying to help Zuko, it's telling that Mei doesn't actually know how to help her boyfriend, as she's not a therapist. As the next we see them, he is spiraling about how his dad might be icing him out of meetings. Her ideas to help are just, let's go for a joyride or abuse your royal privilege. These are all distractions that Zuko is too busy dwelling to enjoy. Mei is trying to be considerate, but she doesn't know what she's doing and she can't really help Zuko unpack his issues. She's happy when he gets to go to his meeting and things go way better than expected, but she doesn't clock how out of it Zuko is after his meeting with Ozai, as this is where Zuko hit his breaking point.
During the meeting, I was the perfect prince, but I wasn't me.
This is the exact dilemma Mei had when she was growing up, choosing between playing a role and being unhappy versus going against her family's wishes. But while she can understand his situation better than anyone, he doesn't tell her. Instead, he decides on his own to turn against the Fire Nation, joining Team Avatar, with all Mei gets out of it being a letter. Which, play the meme.
That's rough, buddy.
Okay, so again, Mei dating Zuko is a narrative plot device for X, Y, and Z reasons. However, the other thing that takes me out of this couple is the disposability of it. Personally, I enjoy them. I think they're cute together, even while I think it lacks buildup and clearly, again, plot device. But the second that Zuko no longer needs her, the story drops her so quickly. Meiko is relegated to being an afterthought. At best, it's a sacrifice Zuko just had to make to do the right thing, with him feeling bad about it. But we don't really see him dwell on it. It's not this massive decision, it's a casualty of the thing he actually had to do, not a deciding factor. This is not something that Zuko ever lingers on or thinks about when we see him again. He isn't broken up about when he's hanging out with the gang, and the only time he ever brings up Mai is when he's talking about exes with Sokka, the same episode she's gonna show up, so they might as well remind people she exists. We get a scene of her interrogating him, which, good, I've loved this, for her. I do feel like this is just here to show the consequences of Zuko's actions more than it is about giving Mai time to shine. So the relationship does at the end of the day feel disposable, something that is only compounded by the fact that Zuko doesn't even really get a chance to react to Mai saving him when he escapes the boiling rock. He's just like, le gasp, it's Mai! And he then proceeds to never bring up his bad bitch again. He doesn't throw her a thanks, nor does he look conflicted about leaving her at the mercy of his sister. Zuko just accepts her noble sacrifice and moves on with his life. They get back together in the end. She has, again, a great line.
But don't ever break up with me again.
But all this just makes it hard for me to care about this relationship, as the story keeps telling me that I really shouldn't get invested in it. It's here, they're cute together, but this is always gonna be about Zuko, and it basically doesn't exist until Mai is back in the room. Zuko's relationship to Mai is a plot device, and this is also the third time they've pulled this shtick.
I was wondering if you would like to go out sometime.
He'd love to.
So if we're being honest, Zuko's journey involves him meeting a lot of people that further his personal development. From the kid he tries to build up to Jet. Zuko is surrounded by people he is learning from, but it's the women in his life that really provide a strong vibe check about where he is in his personal journey. From his early meetings with Song, where he meets another burn victim of the Fire Nation. Song, out of the goodness of her heart, treats Iroh after he poisoned himself, then invites the both of them to dinner despite only just meeting them. She tries to show empathy and understanding to Zuko's jaded and raw self, assuming that he's another victim of the Fire Nation, which he is. She tried to reach out to inspire hope in him, only for him to ignore that hand and to turn around and rob her later that night. Song embodies Zuko learning about what the Fire Nation has done and show that he's not yet ready to trust people or turn to the side of good. With it being the other woman, Jin, who ended up being the test of how much Zuko is willing to let himself actually accept that this, being on the run from the Fire Nation, being an Earth Kingdom refugee, is his life now. He can't allow himself to form genuine connections to the people around him, as that would be him admitting that this is permanent. He was willing to risk exposing himself as a firebending to help the mood and to make Jin happy, but he still pulls away regardless. And for those wondering, Jin is the character Zuko has the most chemistry with. They are actually adorable. But at the end of the day, Jin, like Song, like Mai, are all windows into Zuko's mind. A chance to see where he's at in his journey. Which is why I've always kept Meiko at arm's length, as I like it, but its ulterior motives are obvious, making it hard for me to fully buy this ship, with the ultimate saving grace of this whole relationship being that while I just like them as a couple, this couple made me fucking love Mai.
I love Zuko more than I fear you.
Mai and Toph are the queen of one-liners. Mai pretty much went from a character that I could take or leave to calling Zuko out on his BS, then turning on Azula. Which, Mai's revolt here, this line is in my top 10 moments in Avatar period. With this honestly making her one of my favorite characters. Which we could have gone if they had given her more room to shine on her own without dating Zuko. But if we're picking our poisons and accepting that there is a limited amount of episodes with a limited amount of time, then I will accept that they had to do this relationship to service the plot, as it created an avenue to explore Mai as a character, to let her stand out, without having her to feel limited by the relationship, which I think is the thing that lets me forgive Meiko as it is. Mei is made more interesting even if she's being used to further Zuko's character. The story does enough to make them enjoyable as a couple. It's the lack of setup and the aftermath disposal that rubs me the wrong way, as you can just feel the lack of care. Like, she did her thing, and we don't have time to dwell on it as we have field trips to plan. The relationship still feels disposable, but Mei doesn't. And she honestly makes a story better by just being there, which is more than I can say for some other examples of this, where not only is it painfully obvious that the writers are just using a character as a prop for somebody else, but the lack of subtlety of the fact and the constant contrivance makes me unable to engage in the story, as the because plot is just too obvious to ignore. Which, if you want the most recent example of this that I've seen, check out Dara from the City of Brass. Which this character, and this line is only going to make sense to my ACOTAR fans, but Dara is just Tamlin but worse.
But what does that have to do with it?
Now, truth be told, I just need to get this rant out of my soul, as I have been on a book talk kick, and this one character has been driving me up a wall, and just how unsubtle it is. City of Brass is the first book of the Daevabad trilogy, a story set in the 1800s Middle East, taking inspiration from Jinn mythology and other Indo-Iranian influences. Overall, I think City of Brass is a very fun read, if a little rough around the edges, but Dara is the biggest prick of them all. Essentially, what drives me insane about him is that he is like all of Mei's issues, but worse and without the likability. He is a plot device that acts in accordance with what the story needs to happen. The romantic subplot starts like Meiko, is also shit and comes out of nowhere. Mei's ability to be elevated as her own character makes her role in the story way more forgivable, as she's entertaining and serves a very important function. She sells the idea that Zuko could find happiness in the Fire Nation. They're able to sneak this in there so you can just enjoy Mei as a character and not feel like she is corralling her love interest and the plot into going where the writer needs things to go, which is the fucking thing that Dara is used for constantly. This man is MacGuffin to make things in the story happen. He is the first positive instance that the main heroine experiences of the magical world she's stumbled into, with him then becoming a vehicle to deliver exposition as he takes her to the main setting, Daevabad, which is fine. But I think what makes Dara being a tool of the plot so obvious is just how much his existence grinds against the themes of the story. In a narrative built around moral complexity, he personally sticks out all the more as just a grab bag of cliches that makes him feel at odds with everyone else in the story. He gets better in the later books, but in the first, it does not do enough to distract us from the fact that this man is literally this guy.
Sorry, I can't talk right now. I'm thinking about my past.
Dude is a war criminal who killed women and children. He was also enslaved for centuries. He has all the trauma. So when he shows up, he's the stereotypical brooding bad boy protector who you're supposed to feel sympathy for. But the actual experience is just you're clocking all the tropes he says and realizing this man is Red Flag City. The story just has him and the main girl suddenly hook up, with the reason for that becoming incredibly obvious, as once they get to the city, Nari, the main girl's feelings for Dara, are the only thing holding her back from truly flourishing in her new life. Her situation isn't great, but being the con artist and liar that she is actually able to thrive in the politique of the royal court. Or she would if she wasn't hung up on the guy she didn't even date, and oh look, there's now a love triangle. Kill me. City of Brass, unlike Meiko, makes this relationship the focus of the main plot. Dara is designed to be the ball and chain that keeps the main character from doing what she wants, and this increased focus makes the lack of buildup all the more egregious. They say they've been traveling together months, but it feels like 5 days. Also, Dara is a controlling douche who spends most of the book negging Nari about how she doesn't know what's going on while refusing to tell her what's going on. So not only is this relationship more relevant to the story, but it's less believable and way more in your face. Not every character in the story has to be fully fleshed out, as some characters are just here to be plot devices. But the story does have to not draw attention to the fact that it's just using a character for the plot. or at least make the character entertaining enough that we don't mind spending time with them. Mako, when it gets going, is able to accomplish both of these things, while City of Brass is using Dara to create one of the central conflicts of the story, and then for the finale, he does something so demonstrably stupid, you can literally hear the author writing, and then Dara ruins everything. I won't spoil it, but like everything I mentioned he does, it's so abrupt, you do not have the time to think about it coming. You can make a character a plot device just to serve a character or just the narrative. I just shouldn't be constantly thinking about how this character is just a plot device. For me, Mako is just fine, but Mei is great, so I can tolerate it. But the comics only just cemented my apathy for this couple. As you think, okay, they can do interesting things with them later, but they don't. Zuko just starts keeping secrets as it turns out he's chatting with his dad about how to be a good Fire Lord, with the only time Mei pops into part 1 being just 2 pages, where she's there to say she's worried about Zuko and to tell him to talk to her since she's his girlfriend. Then the story tells her to fuck off till part 2, where she again only appears for like 2 pages, just to break up with Zuko. As like always with this couple, they're fine. But the story always makes it so their relationship never feels important unless it's showing the consequences of Zuko's actions. Mei moves on though. She goes to date some rando, foils a plot her dad was doing. The exes seem to be amped with each other, and Azumi is definitely Mei's kid, so they patch things up eventually. But if you told me that Azumi wasn't Mei's kid, I would just shrug, as I wouldn't really care. Let Mei live her best life, though I do feel bad for all the people who actually ship these two together, as y'all cannot catch a break.